Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to learn how to do some hand lettering. So today I wanted to do a quick, hopefully, tutorial on how to hand letter, because whenever I post on Instagram and my spreads have my hand lettering, I always get questions about it. I get comments on how cool it is and how did I get so good. So I'm here to show you all the steps that I followed to get to this point in my hand lettering journey. So first, I think it's good to sort of reflect back on where you started, or where I started in this case. And I started back in 2016, specifically February. So I kept notebooks like this to keep track of my progress, but also just to have a place where I could practice. And when I first started hand lettering, I was treating it more like I was writing, and so the pen that I was using was for specifically hand lettering, but the way I was using it was the way someone would use a regular pen. So it's got a very sort of calligraphy type look to it, but it definitely I would not consider this hand lettering technically. I think it's just me writing with a brush pen. So this notebook spans from that October period to December of 2016, and as you can see, I see improvement. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I see improvement, and I see it more kind of fleshed out. And then this one is 2017, and this one definitely, so far, by that point I had done a year of practice, and I was very much into writing out Fleetwood Mac lyrics, but the writing is a lot more loose, and here I was really sort of finding my style, and I still write out some of those letters the way I did here. So it's really fun to look back. So if you are starting a hand lettering journey, I highly recommend you keep your notebook so that you can see your improvement. So next up is pens. I personally like this one the best. It's the Tombow Fudenosuke. I am probably pronouncing that wrong, but I will go ahead and link all of these down in the description. And then this one is a Copic Brush Pen, and it's a little harder to sort of maneuver because it's actually got like a brush tip, like a real brush. So I would not recommend that for a beginner. And then you will have these giant Tombow markers, and these are definitely not for beginners. I made that mistake. I had bought these initially and I almost quit because I was like, this is impossible. And it's got two sides, but the little side is just a regular marker. Then even Sharpie makes brush pens. Again, very chunky, a very soft nib, so harder to control. I would say that's probably like intermediate. And here we have sort of like the Tombow Fudenosuke, but this one is like a bootleg version. It still works great though. I would highly recommend either that one or the Tombow. And then if you're feeling adventurous, you can use an actual brush with some watercolor, and it definitely is super hard to control. I would say that's definitely more like advanced level. So we're gonna start out with some plain copy paper. You can use whatever paper you'd like or you'd feel most comfortable using. And I'm just gonna do a quick pen test so you can see the different variations in stroke size when you're using different types of pens. So that one was the Sharpie, which is super thick. This is that Copic like brush marker, which you can see is very streaky, just like a real brush. Next up we have my favorite, and you're gonna see it does some really nice sort of even strokes. I give it an A++++. And then we have the, what I call the bootleg. It's probably not bootleg, it's just a different name, but it's got the same sort of texture as the Tombow, but it's just a little bit streakier. So that one gets a B+. And then we have this guy, very thick strokes, as you can see, very wet. so very hard to control, especially when you're doing like an upward stroke, a thin one like that. It can be very hard to control for like a beginner. So first up, we're gonna do some drills. I think it's good for your hand and for your wrist to warm up, and also it kind of helps build that muscle memory that as a beginner you're not going to have just yet. And I want you to pay attention to the way I'm holding my pen. You're going to hold your pen more towards the top of the pen and at an angle, not straight onto the paper the way you would like a regular pen. So with a regular pen, you hold it more towards the bottom and you're writing straight onto the paper. But with a hand lettering pen, you're holding it at an angle and gliding it across the paper to create the stroke width and size that you'd like. So the first drill you're going to work on is a downward stroke like this at an angle. And I'm holding the paper straight here so that you guys can see what I'm doing, but you really want to hold the paper or place the paper sort of at an angle to make it easier for you. And don't worry so much about spacing or if some are straight, some are like sideways. What matters here is that like the width of your stroke is nice and even and that you're building that muscle memory. Our next drill is going to be upward strokes, and that is really the key to hand lettering, because what makes it look the way it looks is that you have thinner upward strokes than you do downward strokes. Again, I don't want you to focus on spacing or if it looks neat. I just want you to focus on the feel of you creating that upward stroke. Next, we're going to put both of our skills together and practice writing the letter O. O is a great letter to practice because it also, in addition to doing both the thicker and thinner lines, you're sort of looping them together in the same way you would loop together letters to create a word. Next up, we have what I like to call these little hills, and this is a great exercise because it gets you sort of in that momentum movement of when you're creating actual like full words. So this up down movement is very similar to when you're like connecting words, or rather connecting letters together. Our next drill are going to be these little loop-de-loops, which in reality are just L's that are connected, or giant E's. But yeah, these are really fun, and again loosens up your hand and gets your hand used to that movement of connecting letters together. Alright, so now that we did our drills, let's get right into full practice. So here we're going to practice some L's, make it nice and easy. Since we just finished practicing all those loop-de-loops, these should be a breeze. And soon here I'm going to sort of turn my paper because my hand was feeling really tired after kind of like that straight on angle like that. So again, feel free to do that from the beginning. You don't have to keep your paper straight like this. Then here we're going to practice some E's, and these are just like L's, except you're kind of turning them on their side a little bit. So it's the same movement, they're just smaller and more towards like their side. So my next favorite letter to practice is the letter N, and that's very similar to our little hills that we just practiced in our drills. And the one thing you want to make sure is that like your first hill is going to be narrower than your second hill, and you want to leave space in between the two hills like I'm doing here. And what's better than two hills? 3 hills. So we're gonna make a letter M, and it's the same concept except you're adding that extra hill at the end. You want to make sure that you leave space in between all the hills, otherwise it's just gonna look like a regular script M. But when you leave the space, that's what creates the magic and turns it into a hand lettering M. or hand lettered M. And here we're going to practice the letter O, and the letter O is great because you practice the full roundness of the O, but then there's that little squiggly part, and that's going to help you build up like your fine motor like skill as far as hand lettering, because within that little squiggly part there is a thicker part that tapers out into a thinner part. And then we're gonna practice whatever we want. You can practice the initial of your first name like I'm doing here. You can practice letters from your Instagram handle or your YouTube name, or initials of your family members or of your pets. The sky's the limit. And then once you feel comfortable with the letter and how it looks, and you feel comfortable just creating the letter, you can kind of start playing around with style and flourish and adding little details here and there. Like for example here, I'm writing a really fancy G, but if I was starting out, I would just probably try to stick to like just a regular G like that. And remember, with letters that have like that little hill, it's usually capital letters or M and N. You're going to want to leave that space in between that initial hill and the following movement for that letter, because that's going to create that visual space and it's going to give it that official like hand lettered look. And here I'm just playing with different styles of the letter F, and a great way to sort of build up that memory of how letters look with different flourishes. I would recommend following some hand lettering people on Instagram or looking it up on Pinterest, and that really does help you build your style as well, because when you're first starting out you just know what you know, which is like basic like script maybe, or maybe not even script, maybe print. So you definitely want to see a lot of different examples so that you can build up your memory. So now we're done practicing letters and we are moving on to words. So I recommend starting with small words. Then when you're feeling more confident, you can move on to bigger words. I personally like to practice writing names. So here you're gonna see me write the names of my cats. And you can write whatever you'd like, whatever you're comfortable with. I like to use different letters, so I try to vary what I'm writing. But you may be someone who likes to do the same thing over and over until you're comfortable, and that's okay too. The other thing I wanted to point out is that you don't have to fluidly write out a whole word. As you can see here, I'm taking my time and pausing in between each letter. You can do that too when you're first starting out, so that you are comfortable and confident in moving forward and creating something that you are happy with. I wanted to share the one and only hand lettering book I ever bought, and it was definitely worth it. It's great to see the different examples, and they have spaces in here for you to practice side by side with the author's letters. So I'll link this down in the description in case anybody is interested. It's definitely not necessary, but it's a great resource. Okay, so we are nearing the end of this video, so I thought that I would write a quote out here with you guys so we can see how it all kind of pulls together. And this is one of my favorite quotes for many reasons, but it also shows you guys like a good range of letters and how they look together. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making it. All the supplies I used in this video will be linked down below. I want to thank you guys so much for stopping by. I love you so much, and I will see you on the next one.